Hey, how's it going and welcome to another video. Alright, so your boy just finished a game that I've been meaning to get around to for, God, the better part of probably 10 plus years. This has just been one of those games that's kind of been on the, like, sort of perpetual backlog. I'm sure we all have those games that you've either been, like, meaning to finish or meaning to try for just, like, an ungodly amount of time, and there's no particular good reason why you haven't played it. That's kind of just how fate has, like, ordained itself, but no, I finally finished Xenoblade Chronicles, and before I get into it, I wanted to give a huge shout out to the homie Desi, since he actually full-ass bought me the game, so yeah, shout out to him. Can everybody in the comments please say thank you, Desi? That's spelled D-E-C-I, by the way. But yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles is a game I've wanted to play for a very long time. Like, I remember back in the Wii era wanting to play it. Says even though now the Xeno series is more popular than it's ever been, like obviously it's got reps in Smash Brothers. I know a ton of people who've been talking about 3's DLC that came out. So Xenoblade stocks are very high right now, but yeah, way back in the day, Xenoblade Chronicles was one of those kind of like games that sort of had a reputation for being like goated, especially for like the Wii. I remember people talk about this like this was the Wii RPG to play. But it was one of those games that was, like, super highly praised, had, like, really good review scores. Nobody played it. So, yeah, like I said, just never got around to it. But I'm super glad I did, because I really enjoyed this game a lot. This video is not going to contain any specific story spoilers. I'm just going to kind of talk about my general thoughts on the story. Since this is a story I definitely recommend you go into as blind as possible. Also, these are my thoughts on the definitive edition on Switch and not the original on Wii, or the version that's on the 3DS somehow. So man, where do I even start with this one? Because I feel like this is one of those games where I liked pretty much everything. There's really nothing about it that sticks out as being, like, bad or even just okay. I think I liked basically this whole experience. I guess we can start with the story. So I'm usually somebody who's like, obviously I like a good story, but I find more often when it comes to especially JRPGs, I'm a lot more into like the cast and the setting and the themes of the game, but no, I really enjoyed the story of this one. So to give kind of a very quick rundown on the story, there's these two entities called the Mechonis and the Bionis. One is a gigantic organic life form and the other is a huge robot. And the two essentially fought each other to a standstill until they were both incapacitated. And in the millennia following, different life forms started to emerge on them. There was like mechanical life called the Mechon on the Mechonis, and then there was biological life on the Bionis. And the game takes place on the Bionis, and I gotta say, like, in terms of settings, this is one of the coolest, most kind of, like, unique, interesting settings I think I've experienced in a game in a while. Like, the Bionis is this absolutely massive living thing that has all these different kind of terrains throughout its body. Like on its leg it has grassy plains. Once you get towards kind of the top of it, it has snowy fields and tundras. You go inside of it in like its organs at one point. Just super cool. It's such an interesting idea to have a game that takes place on like essentially another living thing. It's kind of like, imagine if you were like a microbe, like living in a person, what that would be like to kind of like try and traverse. So yeah, super cool, really interesting concept for a setting. So yeah, I think it comes highly recommended if you're into really unique, kind of weird out there settings. I can't really think of too many other games that take place on like a living organism, you know? Our main character is Shulk, who's trying to unearth the mysteries of the Monado Blade. A very cool looking sword, which is one of the only weapons that can actually hurt Mechon. And as a horde of Mechon attack the colony they're living in, Shulk realizes that the Monado gives him the ability to see the future. This inspires him and his buddy Ryan to go on a journey throughout the Bionis to defeat the Mechon. So that's a very brief synopsis of like the beginning of the plot. Like I said, I really don't want to spoil too much of it. I think this is a game that you should definitely play for yourself, but maybe at some point I'll end up doing kind of like a Xenoblade spoiler cast or something, where I talk more kind of in-depth about the story, but I think Shulk's ability to see into the future is probably my favorite thing about the story. This also comes into play in the gameplay, which I'll talk about later, which is super cool, by the way, but yeah, I'm a big fan of, like, this isn't necessarily time travel, but any story that has to do with, like, time and fates and kind of, like, just the concept of Shulk being shown these visions of the future and the game kind of asking the question of like, is there anything that can be done about this? Is there a way to alter fate, or are we kind of just, is this just what's gonna happen? Is really, really interesting and super engaging. The story is fairly lengthy, but I feel like it's a pretty good kind of length to where it's not short enough to where you finish it and you're like, okay, where's the rest of it? But it's not one of those JRPGs that kind of drags on for, like, no reason. I think my playthrough ended up being, give or take about 40 hours. That's without doing a lot of the side content. This game has a metric shit ton of side quests and stuff to do, but a lot of it is very kind of fetch questy, right? But no, I think if you're looking for a story that'll kind of take up some of your time, but not too much time, right? Then this is definitely one that I'd recommend. If you're looking for a good old-fashioned just JRPG adventure, this is one I'd totally check out. And then, of course, we have the characters, who, again, I think are really, really solid. I think it's a great cast. Shulk, I think, is a great main character because he kind of feels just, like, protagonist-y enough. That's not a word at all, but he also works really well as kind of just being his own entity. Since he's a pretty smart, friendly, determined kind of guy, but I think he also has a lot of kind of shortcomings that make him interesting, like, he tends to get a little defeatist when the going gets rough, like when he sees a vision that he doesn't like. And I think something that makes him pretty interesting as a main character is just like his drive for revenge. I feel like that's a kind of cool, sort of almost edgy, like character motivation in a game like this. Is that he really just wants to fucking destroy the Mechon. So yeah, Shulk is really cool, really enjoyed playing as him. Ryan is the best friend of the crew. He's kind of like the sort of goofy knucklehead of the group compared to like Shulk, who's a lot more focused and smart. So the two kind of complement and contrast each other. You know, Shulk is a lot more kind of tactical, whereas Ryan is more of an emotional sort of guy. Shulk is kind of more easy to fall to negativity, whereas Ryan tends to be a little bit more positive about things. Sharla is the medic sniper of the group. Wow, I can't believe Overwatch stole from the 2010 Wii game Xenoblade Chronicles.
What are you talking about?
Dunban is just the coolest. He's kind of the guy that has it, like, together the most, and is sort of the character that everybody else kind of looks up to. But my absolute favorite dude, my favorite character of the game is Ricky. Did you guys know I actually am a Nopon? I don't know if you knew this. I don't think I brought it up, but he's just such a funny little guy. Look at him. He is so cute. He's also 40 years old and has like 10 children. So yeah, it's a really good cast of characters. I ended up liking these guys a lot. This is also helped by the existence of what's called heart-to-hearts, which are basically just these little cutscenes that you can do with two different characters. These are a lot of fun, and I think it definitely helps to kind of flesh out the unique relationships that they all have. You can find them kind of scattered throughout the overworld, and there's a lot of these. At some point, I'm gonna go and like watch all of these on YouTube. The game has an affinity system that shows how much certain characters like each other, and this can be boosted by like giving them gifts and engaging in battles together, taking on quests together. And the threshold for a lot of these events is pretty steep, so chances are, unless you really grind it out, you're probably not going to see a lot of them. But they're really cool to have nonetheless. Alright, so to talk about the gameplay a little bit, I ended up really liking the combat in this game. It's pretty unique compared to a lot of other, like, RPGs. It's a sort of action RPG, where there's not really any turns. It's kind of similar to, like, MMO combat, I guess is a good way of describing it, where every action has a cooldown, and your position in the battle makes a difference. So, like, some attacks might inflict a status ailment if you hit them from the side. Some attacks might do more damage if you hit them from behind. So there's a lot of strategy involved with your positioning and where you place the enemies at, and who currently has aggro locked onto them. Like I said, if you've played any MMOs, this might feel pretty familiar to you, but yeah, it's really fun, and it managed to keep me engaged throughout the entire game since the combat is just so fast-paced and kind of hectic. Since you're not really afforded the luxury of, like, having time to think, essentially, right? You know, even though I love most kind of, like, turn-based combat, the battle system in this really doesn't give you any time to breathe or to, like, stop and really think. Because enemies are constantly attacking, those gauges of yours are always refilling. You have to keep in mind, like, your allies' health and any status ailments that are going on. And there's no, like, in-battle consumables, so you can't, like, open up a thing and revive somebody, use, like, a Phoenix down, right? So it's kind of like what you go into a battle with is what you go in there with. And I think it definitely helps just how unique every character is. Like, no two characters feel like they fight the same, and they all bring something totally different to the table. Shulk, for example, is kind of just a big bag of tricks. Like, his main gimmick is using the Monado to apply different effects to the party. For example, he has, like, Shield that he can apply, which will, like, absorb a hit from the enemy's attacks. Or he has Buster, which is just his big fuck-ass swing. or speed, which increases your dodge rate. And other than that, he's kind of just like a general utility character. Like, he has good damage overall. He has a heal. Shulk is a lot of fun to play as, but you're not limited to just playing as Shulk. You can swap around and play as any of these characters. Ryan, for example, is like your tank. He has a lot of skills that are based on drawing aggro and hitting enemies for big damage and kind of sustaining himself. Charla is your healer. She has a lot of like healing moves, stuff that inflicts status ailments. Dunban is really interesting. I didn't really get a chance to use him a whole lot, but he's sort of like a dodge tank, essentially. He has a lot of similar aggro generating stuff that Ryan has, but he doesn't have nearly as much health or defense, but he makes up for it with a lot of cool combo attacks. Melia is kind of weird. She's like a buff mage, essentially. Like, she'll summon these little things that'll apply a bonus to the party, like it might increase your attack or defense. And then she can fire them off and do really big damage. Unsurprisingly, Ricky was my favorite character to play as. Ricky is weird. I guess Ricky is essentially like a status and elemental mage. Like, a lot of his stuff has to do with inflicting status ailments like bleed or freeze or burn. So yeah, Ricky's really handy to have around just for the amount of just the amount of shit he applies to the enemy. Like, you have Ricky around, the enemy will fall over, be poisoned, be burnt, be frozen. He'll be asleep. And the characters are also complemented by how many different arts they can learn. Depending on the character, they might learn up to 15 different arts that do different stuff, but I think you can only apply, I think it's about 8 at a time. So there's a ton of room for customization and experimentation. The way you end up building some of these characters might be totally different from how somebody else might build them. So there's a ton of opportunities to really customize these guys and kind of make them feel like your own. And even though you can only use 3 party members at a time, I found myself wanting to use all of these guys, right? And if you want to, you could totally just play that way. Like, the game will award experience to people no matter if they participate in battle or not, which I think is a feature every JRPG should have, please, thank you. So if you're just somebody who's constantly swapping in and out different party members, you can just do that. But my favorite sort of gimmick of the combat system are the visions that you'll encounter. Since Shulk can see into the future, every now and again when an enemy will deal a fatal blow to one of your allies, Shulk will actually see a vision of what's going to happen. So for example, an enemy might use super ultra mega fuck you laser, and it'll knock out Dunban. And the game will give you 8 seconds to react to it and do something about it before Dunban dies. And I think this is such a super, super cool way of kind of integrating the story and the character's abilities into the gameplay. So whenever that happens, it's like a mad dash to kind of prevent catastrophe. You can either use the Monado to apply a shield onto everybody, and that'll usually fix the issue, but sometimes all it takes is you just gotta heal them up to where they have more health so they can survive the attack. Sometimes a nice stun will knock them out of it. And you can also walk up to your ally and warn them about the incoming attack, and then that lets you, choose their next action. So yeah, it's just a really, really cool, really fun system. It creates a lot of real oh shit kind of moments when it's you're down to the wire, your guys are really not in great shape, and then Shulk has a vision and it turns out you're going to get wiped in 8 seconds. I think the gameplay's difficulty, it also strikes a really fair balance. I played it on normal, and I found it to overall be a pretty good challenge. There was the occasional boss or fight I was stuck on for a little bit, but overall, for me at least, the challenge felt really good. It's kind of right at my level. But if you like a good challenge, maybe consider bumping it up to expert mode. So yeah, other than that, I'm kind of struggling to think of anything that I really have to complain about. Like I said, I think it's just a really, really solid game. At most, there's a couple of segments of the story that are not even bad, there's just certain kind of design choices that I think are a little quirky. There's this one stretch of the game, so the Mechon enemies can't be hurt by normal weaponry. And there's this one segment kind of early on where you just fight waves and waves of Mechon. And the only way for the rest of your party to hurt them is if Shulk applies the enchant thing on them. So there's kind of this little stretch of the game where basically every fight you kind of have to dick around and wait for the enchant to be up. And so that slows down the pace of the game a lot. I feel like that's kind of just a really goofy design choice. Actually, there is one thing, now that I'm kind of thinking about it, there was something that honestly made me almost drop the game. All the British people. Nah, I'm just kidding, I'm not like that. So yeah, story, really, really good, great setting, nice cast of characters, gameplay that's super fun. Complaints? British people? That sounds like a fucking, like, IGN review, right? Great gameplay, great story. Cons, the British. But yeah, no, like I said, I think this is just like a really, really solid, really good game overall. I think it comes highly recommended. I would definitely check it out if you've like had an interest in Xenoblade, if it's been on the old to-do list for a while, or if you're just looking for something new and kind of different to play. I think Xenoblade definitely stands out among the crowd. I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, what's next for my Xeno journey? Because at this point, I think I'm definitely kind of like invested and I want to play more games in the series. I really want to play Xenoblade Chronicles 2 now. That's one of those games that like, you know, I've seen a lot of kind of discourse and like debate about that game. That seems like one of those games I really want to have an opinion on. Like, I get sort of bothered whenever there's a game that's like sort of contentious where I just don't have an opinion on because I haven't played it. I try not to be an internet goblin who like forms an opinion about something before I've actually played it, or at least given it an attempt, you know? So we'll just have to see how that goes. I'm also interested in checking out Xenosaga, like the PS2 games at one point, and maybe Xenogears down the line. To be honest, I don't know how much energy I have right now for, you know, multi-dozen hour-long PS1 JRPG at the moment. So we'll see. Xenoblade 2 is definitely probably on the to-do list next, though. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Again, big thank you to Desi for getting me the game. It's another game off the old bucket list, but yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles, very, very good. Check it out. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.
With these people, for the sake of the village, you must go. My instinct is never wrong.